Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. My name's Adam and I am the online content manager for AStepFWD. Just recently joined the team and looking forward to getting involved, getting some great content going. Shameless plug, if anyone's interested in producing awesome content, whether that's articles, reviews, videos, interviews, whatever, just give us a shout and we'd love to hear from you. Today I have the absolute pleasure of interviewing a great man who is not only a great vocalist, he's a great teacher, coach, leader, speaker, and most importantly, follower of Christ. So I'm just excited to hear what Rob's got to say. So I'm going to hand over to Rob and let him introduce himself. So over to you, Rob.
Hi everyone, I'm Rob. It's really great to be able to share with you today. I'm a vocal coach. I'm a member of the British Isles Council of Prophets. I'm a worship leader, a speaker, you name it. There's a whole bunch of things in that box. I'm based in North London, but at the moment everything's online, right? So, oh, there we go. There's the piano. And this is where I sit to teach and work with my clients. Even before lockdown happened, about 50% of my clients were online from all over the world: America, New Zealand, Korea, Switzerland, Norway, all over the place really. Even people in London who were just like so crazy busy they couldn't get here. And in my kind of professional vocal coaching work, I work with a bunch of Christian artists, either the worship leaders, backing singers, singer-songwriters, and then commercial artists as well. So musical theatre people. I have a passion for musical theatre, love working with musical theatre performers, but also commercial singers, songwriters, backing singers, session singers, that kind of thing. And also choirs, choir directing, workshops with choirs. So that's kind of what my professional life looks like. And then at the same time, developing, I've got a prophetic team at church that I lead, but also I lead one of the Global Prophetic Alliance, Prophetic Nests, which is a group of prophets that I lead, as well as being part of our Catch the Fire Global Prophetic team. And the other thing, the new thing that God has me on at the moment is I have a passion for bringing reformation in the Seven Mountains. So for me, that would look like bringing some of that into the music industry and the people that I'm working with and particular artists that God has given me prophetic words for, but also it's raising up and equipping other people in the body of Christ to bring reformation, transformation in their sectors. Lots of people talking about revolution at the moment, and I actually believe that God is saying, no, we don't want a revolution. We want to bring reformation, transformation that lasts and does so in such a way that destroys darkness but doesn't destroy people. So that's called Reformation Rising, and we're running through our first phase of that at the moment with our beta testing group at the moment, which is absolutely amazing. There's 3 people from the music industry in that, a couple of business people, and someone who's in the NHS. And so we're looking at bringing transformation in those different areas. So that's just a little bit of what I've been doing during lockdown as well.
That sounds like, how do you have like 12 days in your week?
I soak a lot. I tell you, it's the presence of God.
Yeah.
When you spend time in the presence of God, all fruitfulness flows from intimacy. So there is no idea that I could come up with out of my head that is anywhere near as good as the one that God downloads. And so if I ask God to come and bless what I'm doing, I'm going to be in trouble. Rather than saying, God, what are you doing and how do you want me to join in?
Yeah.
God created the world for Adam. Adam didn't create the world for God to come and join his party.
That's right. That's right. I think that's where so many people can trip up, because they can get the wrong idea in their head about priorities and about the order that they need to put things in. So it's so good that even though you're involved in so many great things, God is the main thing.
Yeah,
And I
totally.
think just, that's the encouragement that I reckon, like, whenever people watch this, like, that's just the encouragement that someone needs. That's the,
I think if you don't have him at the center, and I'm assuming that most of the people watching this are going to be creatives, they're going to be people who are really interested in music. And here's the thing, unless God is the source of all of that, what that creating does is actually becomes an expression of our brokenness rather
yeah,
than of God's creativity and the redemption that he's brought on the inside of us. And
yeah,
so many singers sing out of their pain rather than singing from their healing.
yeah,
And it's not that necessarily lamenting is wrong, because the Bible has, was it two-thirds of the Psalms or something are
yeah,
laments. Also, we've got the whole book of Lamentations.
yeah, yeah,
And so there's a real thing in there about expressing pain to God. But here's the thing, there's a difference between expressing our pain to God and putting brokenness on display
yeah,
and bringing a defilement through spewing our junk.
yeah,
And I think that's a really big difference. And the most amazing artists that I work with are those who understand how to be vulnerable and bring the authenticity, the realness of who they are as a singer, as an artist, put it on display, warts and all, but they're not at the same time spewing the defilement, if that makes
yeah,
sense. Whereas you
yeah,
see that a lot in the kind of the secular music industry. Some of the people I work with as well there, it's like, they come to me, they bring their songs, and it's a beautiful song, but I'm listening to it going, oh man, you need Jesus. This is an expression of your hurt and your pain, and Jesus can like deliver you and heal you of all of that. And you could write something even more amazing out of that
yeah.
place of freedom.
That's so good. That's so good. I could just talk about that all day. The questions are out the window, but I think if we let's jump into you as a vocal coach and as a vocalist. What was your journey like? How did you get into singing in the first place? And secondly, how did that then end you up where you are just now?
Yeah, so I my parents are both Christians, so I grew up in a Christian home, praise God. And that was the church for us was the Salvation Army. And so
Yeah,
I grew up around a lot of music. And yes, it was the uniforms. And when I was little in the 80s, it was the bonnets and the capes and the brass bands and the choirs. But the thing that really gripped me was the choirs. And I loved the singing. I loved the four-part harmony all the time. And my mum was an amazing singer, not trained at all, but she used to sing duets with one of her best friends a lot at church, and they just had the most beautiful blend. And so I would sing at school. I joined the school choirs. And I loved playing piano. I started playing piano when I was 5 years old. And I just would sing and play and do all of that kind of stuff. My parents aren't formally trained musicians, and we grew up in a little seaside town, so there wasn't a huge amount of access. No one had the internet back then.
yeah,
My parents didn't know how to uh, do anything other for me than to hire a piano teacher and let me join the choir at school and
yeah,
at church and so forth. But so I had this hunger, and then as I got older, I would see gospel music would come on the TV, and oh my gosh, I was so in love with that sound. I just fell in
yeah,
love with it. But growing up in sleepy Suffolk, it's entirely white, and there was none of that happening where I was living. And then when I came to university to study music, I started getting involved with the London Community Gospel Choir, with their community projects, and then ended up doing my undergraduate dissertation at university in British gospel music, and studied that and started a choir. Then I went to York to do my master's, started another choir, which is still running to this day. They don't have a clue who I am, the people who are running that now. I don't mind about that a bit, because it was set up with the expressed intention of being as authentic as possible, but having longevity and being able to be
yeah,
passed down. And in the midst of that, I was then doing more singing, having lessons myself, both classical and some other commercial stuff. Came back to London, trained to be a secondary school music teacher. And while I was training to be a secondary school music teacher, I absolutely wrecked my voice. Ashamed to say, yelling at a kid one day, you know, as a trainee teacher, completely stressed out of my mind, in the largest secondary school in the UK at the time, absolute bedlam. And much of that was my fault because I didn't know how to, you know, my classroom management skills were pretty poor at that point. And it just snapped, it was gone. I then spent 7 years having speech therapy and nothing was really working. And after many years, I ended up at the Royal National Throat, Nose and Ear Hospital here in London with an absolutely phenomenal speech therapist called Dr. Ruth Epstein, who is one of my heroes now. Now that I'm a proper voice geek, she's one of my heroes. And sitting in front of her one day, I just thought, you know, I'm going to take this opportunity and ask every question I could possibly ask about voice. And I started listing all the different methodologies and schools of thought around voice, the traditional ones, the modern ones, all kinds of stuff. And as I was listening to them, she kept going, no, don't go for that. It's, no, that's got problems, this has got problems. I came to this particular one and she was like, yeah, it's okay, but be careful. And I was like, okay, that's as good enough for me. That's as near enough to an endorsement as I'm going to find. So I left there straight away, booked onto a course at the Royal Academy of Music to go and study this particular vocal methodology. Did that, completely transformed my life. My speaking voice was there, my singing voice was there. I then just was like, that was it. I was hooked, total voice geek. I'd already been teaching singing for a number of years, but this was the thing that unlocked it. And that began my journey of vocal geekery, and all these books started appearing and started studying with different coaches, different programs, ended up taking, you know, courses in advanced anatomy for voice and all that kind of stuff. And the thing that really spurred me on was this feeling of freedom that came to me when the physical and emotional, psychological and spiritual barriers were all removed that had prevented me from singing the way I'd wanted to sing. And it was the culmination of those different things, the emotional baggage, the physical issues from not knowing how to actually use it, and the spiritual blockages and junk that was stopping me being the creator that God wanted me to be.
Wow. That's just what a journey.
Yeah.
How would you say, so did you ever feel like giving up?
Well, this is a common problem for singers. They open their mouth and they go to sing and they're never quite sure what's going to come out.
Yeah.
Is my voice going to be there today? Am I going to be able to hit that note? Negative feedback coming to them from auditions, from pastors, from studio producers, from, you know, from a review in the newspaper or online, you know, this constant barrage of stuff comes. And for me, it was similar. It was, is my voice going to be there? Am I going to be able to get through the set? Am I going to be able to do, you know, this particular performance or worship or whatever today? And when I dealt with the barriers, that all went. And so no, prior to that, I wasn't going to give up because I'm not the kind of person who gives up. I'm a bit like a terrier after a rat, you know, stick my nose in the hole and I keep going until I grab hold of that thing. And that, I believe, is a grace that God has given me. But I also had around about me, and I think this is really important, I had particularly a group of friends who wouldn't give up on me either. Because, you know, I actually used to have depression.
Right.
And I suffered really badly with depression for quite a number of years. And then in 2010, God healed me instantly in a meeting. Actually, a Heidi Baker meeting. The Holy Spirit just crashed in on me. I got completely delivered of depression, and I just laughed for the next 25 minutes, and that was that. But up until that point, it had been about just going for it. And so I just encourage anyone who feels like giving up, not to entertain even the thought of giving up. We need Romans 12, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. We really, really have to grasp hold of that, take every thought captive. And in the world of voice, the neuroscience is important. And when we change the way we think, i.e. we repent, which is the word metanoia in the New Testament, we actually can change the way we sing, even by the way we think about our singing.
Right. Wow.
Here's the thing. Most voice conditions, about 2/3 of voice conditions that show up in the voice clinics in the hospital are what we call psychogenic, i.e. they are more psychology than they are anything else. And so from a Christian perspective, we'd say, well, it's soul. It's in the realm of the soul that this issue has its origin, not in the realm of the body. And so if we can deal with the realm of the soul, we deal with the realm of the body, and the voice comes correct. And most of them are because of the emotional turmoil in the soul, which causes tension in the voice, or something we call muscle tension dysphonia, and the voice packs up. That's very often why someone will be singing and it'll be okay, and suddenly they get a little bit nervous and the voice goes. Everything locks up and they're like, I can't sing. Yeah, because everything got really tight. It's one of the places in our body that we store tension. You know how you get tight shoulders when you're a bit stressed or whatever? Or you get a knot in your tummy, or people end up with irritable bowel syndrome and all those kinds of things. That's another thing God healed me of. 20 years of IBS completely gone in a moment. And again, linked to all kinds of stuff. But the voice is one of them, and it's linked actually to the same part of the nervous system as these other parts of the body that hold tension. So yeah, we have to work with a whole person, not just a voice.
Yeah, that's you wouldn't have known that without all of this great knowledge that you're sharing with us today. I feel like I've learned so much already, but I'm gonna dig for more. I'm not finished.
Go for it. Go for it.
So we've had quite a few questions about technique and about people want to know more about how they can improve what they do, improve their skill set, and so on. So starting with breathing,
Yes.
are there any specific techniques you would recommend or discourage?
Oh, absolutely. Breathing is huge. Okay, will you be my guinea pig, Adam?
I will be.
The easiest way to talk about breathing is actually to do an exercise. So guys, you're going to get a whole bunch of free exercises today. Take the moment. This is worth a lot of money. Okay, so, and what I want you to do is I want you to put your hand on just below your belly button. On that lower part of your tummy, kind of the V that every guy who works out really wants to get. Mine's got a bit too much lockdown paunch on it at the moment, so it's not going to be there. But that V, so between the pubic bone and the belly button, that's where your hand is. What I want you to do is I want you to blow out as hard as you possibly can and get rid of all the air as quickly as you can, and then stop with your mouth open and your tongue hanging out until I tell you to let go. Okay, I'm not going to say anything more, so it's going to be a blow it all out as quickly and hard as you can, and work to get every droplet of air out your body. Okay, off you go. Keep going. Push, push, push. You've got more air than that. Get it rid of all of the air. Push it out, push it out, push. Now stay there, mouth open. Don't breathe. I know you probably want to kill me right now, but that's okay. Just stay there, stay there, stay there. And when I say the word release, I want you to let go of all of the effort in your body and let yourself have a breath. Go. Okay. When you release the tension, what happened in your lower belly?
It felt just miles better in terms of like I didn't feel stressed, I didn't feel strained at all.
Cool. So when the air came back into your body, what happened with your lower belly?
Let's do it again and I'll answer that. So I was focusing on breathing at that point.
Guys watching, you can do this with Adam. We're going to blow all the air out. Once we've squeezed out every droplet of air from our body, we're going to have our mouth open and our tongue out, and we're not going to let the air in until I click my fingers, and then you're going to let the air come back in as if you're just like relieved, like you've just suddenly come up from being under the water in a swimming pool for a minute. Okay, that's the kind of thing you're going to be. Let it all back in. Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1, blow out. Work it, work it, work your body, work your body, work your body. Harder, harder, harder. Now pause. Okay, you're going to stay there, stay there, stay there, stay there. I won't let you pass out. It's okay. I won't let you pass out. I won't let you pass out. Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1. Suddenly breathe. Okay, what happened in your lower belly?
I'll wait for you to tell me because I think I've got a bit too much lower belly to have noticed.
So here's the thing. The way I work is I'm a coach, so I'm not a teacher. So I don't tell people what they should feel and what should happen. And da, 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 da. So normally in a lesson where we'd spend time working through this, I would be asking lots of questions, because asking questions is a much more powerful way of learning than saying you should feel this and it should go like that and da 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 da. All these shoulds actually just put pressure on people. Whereas the questions help people discover for themselves, and actually then what they do is they develop their own language around it for their body and their experience of it, rather than me going, it should do this and this and this. Okay, so one of the things what we're looking for in that in-breath, if I was to put language to it, is when the air comes in, we're looking for a release in the lower belly. So the lower belly should feel really relaxed as the breath comes in. Did you notice that?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Cool. And so it's like after you've received that breath in, notice I say received and not take. So after we've received that breath in, it's almost like we've had 15 Christmas dinners. And of course, we all know that there's no air going into our belly, it goes into our lungs. But as the diaphragm comes down, it displaces our abdominal contents. And unless we break our spine, the only place they can go is forwards if we let go of the belly. So here's the first top tip. When you are on an in-breath, you want the belly to be relaxing. Completely relaxing. We call this a splat breath. Singer, please loosen abdominal tension. That's the number one top tip. Is I've got this amazing book here, which is... you don't have to buy this. This is a PhD thesis. It's a bit complicated, but it's called If in Doubt, Breathe Out. And the premise is this, is that most of the time, most singers have too much air in their bodies. And if you have too much air, you generate too much air pressure and you blast your vocal folds, okay? So that's the first bit of geekery today, is relax on your in-breath. Now, the number one thing not to do is yank your belly button in hard when you are singing. If you yank your belly button in too hard when you are singing, you generate too much of that pressure that we were talking about. Yes, we want some what we call subglottic pressure. We do want that. But if we have too much, it's actually damaging for the poor little vocal folds. If you look at your thumbnail, your vocal folds are roughly, unless you've been to the nail bar and got, great big plastic nails on, roughly the length of your thumbnail, and they're about 4 millimeters thick-ish, and the top layer of your vocal folds is only 6 to 8 cells thick. They are tiny little things vibrating away. And if you were to just take your head off your vocal tract and just hear your vocal folds vibrating, they just sound like this. That's all they'd sound like, just buzzing away. It's everything else that contributes to the sound. So number one tip is relax on the in-breath. Number two tip is don't pull your belly button in hard when you are singing. Now, the next logical question is, well, then what do I do when I am singing? Sadly, that's a slightly too complex question to work on here. But a very quick thing you can do is, if you, Adam, I just want you to lift your arms up like this. Great. That elevates your rib cage, which means that your rib cage is not collapsing on top of your lungs and squishing too much air out. And then I want you to sit forward on the front of your chair, or if you guys are standing up at home, you can stand up. And then I just want you to lean back until you feel the muscles in the front of your tummy and that lower V below your belly button engage.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So we're just keeping our body perfectly straight and just leaning back from our hips, from our pelvis, and we feel that lower tummy muscle engage. That sense of engagement is what we want to be there when we're singing or when we're speaking even. So even this whole time I'm talking to you, I've got that little V engaged every time I
Yeah.
start to make a sound. And then when I breathe, I relax the belly and my belly button flops forward. And then I engage that muscle and the whole thing just flattens out. It doesn't yank in. So
Yeah.
that's the top tips. So 3 top tips there. 1, relax the belly on the in-breath. 2, do not yank your belly button in when you are singing. And 3, lean backwards to feel the type of engagement that you want. It's much more complex than that, but that will help you to start with.
Excellent. Another question we had was differentiating between your, your inner voice, like the voice you think you're producing,
Right.
and the voice you're actually producing. Like, how do you overcome, I am not someone that you would want to put in front of a microphone. Like, I'm happy with either that or that, but not, I wouldn't be a blessing to the congregation, let's put it that way.
Yet.
But yet, yeah, work in progress. It's only 33 years and still going. But how would you help someone push through that barrier of, like they know they can produce a great sound, they want to produce a great sound, they are fully committed to producing a great sound, but when the rubber hits the road, something holds them back. Like,
It's
how
such
do
a
you
great
get past
question.
that hurdle?
Sorry. Yeah, this goes back to what we were saying earlier, and it's an identity question fundamentally.
Yeah.
Because if your identity is secure, if you know that you're a son or daughter of God, and
Yeah.
you know that He already delights in you, then it doesn't matter what comes out of your mouth to one extent. Now, obviously, it does because we want to sound good, and we don't want people to think we sound terrible. But at the same time, we need to get rid of our over reliance on the opinions of other people.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean that their opinions aren't important to an extent. What it means is the extent to which they're important. If you're the kind of person who is easily bruised every time someone makes a comment about your voice, then you're not ready, or it's not the right call on your life. That's not what God has called you to. Because here's the thing. If you try and do something that someone else is called to, it will never work for you, number one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Number 2, if you're constantly comparing yourself to other people, it's never going to work. Jesus told us, he says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. But if you don't love yourself well, then it's
Yeah.
a non-starter. And that's not the same as narcissism or self-promotion or pride or arrogance. It's being able to see ourselves as God sees us. We are the apple of his eye. Isaiah, I think it's Isaiah or Jeremiah, we are Hephzibah, which means his delight is in us. If you know you're already delighted in, if you know that you are precious beyond anything else, if you know that you matter to him, then what comes out of your mouth doesn't have such a big bearing. During this lockdown, you guys can go and look. I've recorded so many worship sets during this lockdown. None of them are vocally particularly brilliant at all. I just don't care though, because I
Yeah.
didn't do it for the approval of man. I did it because I love Jesus. Now, does that mean I don't want it to be good? Of course I want it to be good. What I'm saying is I don't let it bother me if it doesn't come out great.
Yeah.
And most of those were recorded when I was physically very, very tired, or I think I probably had corona near the beginning, and so I was in recovery from corona, or I've had some emotional stuff go on with family during this lockdown, which has been challenging. Bless her, my mum's been very sick, and so there's been a lot of emotion, and so when we have those things going on, our voices don't necessarily always work as well as we'd hoped. But
Yeah.
what I'm not doing is I'm not deleting them online. I'm not freaking out going, oh, there's a bad video of me. Like, no, it's just not it's not, my identity is not connected with how great I sound on any particular day. So we need to unhook our identity from how good we sound.
Yeah.
Now, one thing it's important to say is our voice is a part of how we express our identity,
Yeah.
but it is not our identity. And that's the fundamental distinction that we need to get. And when we listen to artists, very often we're looking for the uniqueness in the voice that expresses their identity. But that's the point. It expresses it. It isn't it in and of itself.
Yeah.
And in an age where where confusing messages are sent, particularly to young people, about what identity is, it's really important that if you're listening to this, you don't merge your identity with what you do or how you express your identity. They are not the same thing. So that would be the number one thing. And I think, secondly, if you have in your mind an idea about how you want to sound and you feel like you don't sound like that, you have to cut yourself some slack. You have to cut yourself some slack and say, it's a journey and I'm working towards where I want to be. But also, like I said before, don't copy someone else. Don't try and produce someone else's voice. Your voice is more unique than your fingerprint. So run with that.
That will be a massive encouragement for people, because I think we do live in a time when someone is always going to be comparing this to that, or they're the next whoever, and that's not what you need. So that's so good. Going a step further, looking at the leadership side of things, how do you find, with your involvement at Catch the Fire, how do you find, going in as a vocal coach, are you able to turn off I'm a vocal coach to professionals who are paying me to do A, B, and C, and bring out appropriate gold from people who are, they've got the willingness to do it. Their skills maybe not at the level that you're used to working with, but you can still help them get from A to B without it being you're babying them. How does that look? And I'm thinking from, like, I've got friends who are professionally trained singers who, like the girl that leads the worship team at my church, she's she was one of the kind of up and coming opera singers in Scotland, and she's coming with all of this great training to teach, someone who's an accountant and someone who's a teacher, and people who love what they do because they love Jesus, they love that great gift that's in them. But how do you draw the line between, okay, he's just pushing us further than we want to go?
So I think what we're talking about here is the line between heart and excellence.
Yeah.
Part of the jigsaw puzzle that we need to get rid of is perfection.
Yeah.
We have to get rid of perfectionism. And there are very few singers that I work with professionally who don't have a high level of perfectionism that needs to be dealt with. And I can say that because it was part of my journey. Excellence versus heart. Well, Jesus loves both.
Yes.
And he's worth both.
Yes.
If you are not prepared to put in some of the work in order to improve where you're at, then perhaps it's not for you. We would not be okay with our pastors getting up on a Sunday to preach who had not put the time in the secret place with the Lord and in studying the word, receiving the message from heaven, and then bringing us the fresh rhema word on a Sunday with understanding from the scriptures. We would not tolerate that, the word flim-flam comes to mind, It's kind of like, we wouldn't tolerate this kind of lax attitude and frankly dishonoring attitude towards the word of God and the people of God. And so on a Sunday, if we have musicians and we have singers who are coming who have not practiced, who have not spent any time honing their craft, who have not spent time practicing the songs and the sets, if we have worship leaders who haven't spent time in the secret place praying and seeking the Lord, saying, God, how do you want to be honored on Sunday with your people? What songs do you want me to lead? What's the journey you want us to go on in the place of worship together? Then again, there's something very dishonoring both to God and to the people of God in that. And so there is something about us coming and saying, I'm actually going to put the time and effort into it. But at the same time, our goal is not perfection. And our goal is not to be the best at everything. Our goal is to say, am I progressing and am I improving and am I being diligent and deliberate in that process? Without putting on ourselves undue pressure, which comes from, again, from the perfectionism or from comparing ourselves. And we know that there are particular churches that have a particular mandate from God to bring a sound that is above average in terms of its technical accomplishment. Now, that doesn't mean that a church that is not Hillsong is less honoring to God, you know?
Yeah.
But we know that Hillsong, there is a mandate. It's a tribe of Judah type church, you know, that has a prophetic apostolic mandate on it to bring forth in the earth excellent music and worship that resources the global body of Christ. Yeah. And so we want to honor that, but we don't want to set that as our standard for, you know, the local village church, you know? It's like if you live in a village of 50 people and there's one old lady who plays the piano and that's it. Do you know what? We're not going to look down on that, are we? We're going to say, you know what? God loves it, whatever we bring. But what we want to say is we want to use whatever resources we have to give him the best, without it becoming about excellence above honoring his presence. And if the people on stage are more consumed by the music than they are the presence of God, then we've missed a trick. But here's the thing, you know, the church that I go to, we love spontaneous and prophetic worship. We love going off-piste. We love exploring. And I absolutely love that. Here's the thing, the more technically accomplished you are, the more you can facilitate that.
Yeah.
The weaker you are musically, the quicker you're going to get lost and go, oh, you're not doing the song now. What am I meant to do? What chords are you playing? I can't hear what chords it is. You know, oh, I don't know the lyrics to this bit. No, because it's just come straight from the Spirit of God out of the mouth of the worship leader. I do. How do I harmonize? I don't know how to sing a harmony to that. I didn't practice it during the week. So that creates anxiety in people. And again, it's to do with a need to develop the technique. That doesn't mean if you're at that stage there's a problem. What it means is keep going, keep learning, push yourself, but get rid of any kind of ungodly striving in the midst of that. So let's go for heart, let's go for the presence of God, and let's go for excellence at the same time so we can honor him with both.
Wonderful, wonderful. So looking at another aspect of how we can prepare vocally, diet. What's the correlation between your diet and your vocal health?
Oh wow, how long have we got? So let's just let's do some myth busting here, right?
Yeah.
There is a lot of nonsense out there about food and as it relates to the voice. Let's talk pure anatomy. I'm going to face this way so you can see me. This thing that runs down the front here, where air comes down, is the trachea. Behind it is the esophagus, where food goes. They are separate pipes, okay? You tell me how something you stick in your mouth is going to have a positive influence directly on your voice. It's a different, nothing that you swallow is directly going to benefit your vocal folds. Now, there are some things that will directly have a less beneficial effect. So there are, they will remain nameless because I don't want to get sued, but there are particular throat sweets out there which are for singers apparently, and they have some ingredients in which we in the Voice Geek world have big question marks against. And I'm part of the Voice Geek forum on Facebook, and the voice professionals groups and other vocology in practice, and we talk about these things. Such things as menthol, peppermint, eucalyptus. These things we have big concerns about because they all have analgesic properties that numb the vocal folds through their vapors. So it's not what we swallow there that's the problem, it's what we inhale over our vocal folds. So they end up not being so sensitive, so we can damage them more easily because we can't feel them properly. The other thing is particularly menthol and eucalyptus have a drying impact on the mucous membranes, which is why when we have a cold, we inhale with them because it helps in that regard. Now, they do have anti-inflammatory properties to a point. So does peppermint. But they all have this analgesic property and drying property. So we just want to avoid those if we're going to sing. Something else you want to avoid, like without question, is aspirin before you sing, because aspirin has anti-clotting properties for the blood. And if you're a high intensity singer, the capillaries in your vocal folds are very close to the surface. And one of the things that will end a singer's career instantaneously is a vocal hemorrhage. And a vocal hemorrhage is when that blood vessel just bursts. And the blood comes through the layers of the vocal folds and they end up bleeding. So if you've ever coughed up blood when you've been singing, you absolutely want to be referred to a laryngologist, not just a ear, nose and throat specialist. It must be a voice specialist, a laryngologist, in order to have a camera look at your vocal folds, not just to see if there's any lumps or bumps on them, but to see how they move. And only a laryngologist will understand what that's meant to look like and have the equipment to be able to tell. So aspirin, it's not directly that it causes a vocal hemorrhage, but if you are using high intensity singing, the likelihood of that is increased with aspirin. Dairy is another one. Lots of people say, oh, you mustn't have dairy before you sing because it causes phlegm. Well, here's the thing. Some people it does, some people it doesn't. So you just have to experiment. So let's bust that myth. Other things. Let's see. Caffeine. Yes, caffeine's a diuretic, which means that it can dehydrate you. But the research is inconclusive. Some people say that the research on diuretics like caffeine in a cup of coffee says that it will cause you to dehydrate more than the liquid you take in with it. Whereas a lot of other research says, no, actually the amount of water in that cup of coffee balances it out. So I would say don't worry too much about whether you're having caffeine or not. Worry about how much water you're having, because we know that the body produces about 2 liters of mucus a day. And so you need to produce, that's from lips to bum. Just saying, everything from lips to bum is mucus, okay? It's what keeps you alive, and your lungs are lined with it, as is your mouth. You just run your tongue around your cheek. That's mucosal layer. That's what your vocal folds are covered in. It's called epithelium. And so you need to drink 2 liters of water just to replace that every day. So we want to be drinking more than that. And here's a top tip. You must drink and be at your maximum hydration 3 hours before you sing. Why? Because it takes 3 hours from when you drink for it to reach your vocal folds. They are one of the last things in the body to get hydrated, and it takes 5 to 7 days of overhydration to reach what we call systemic hydration. So if your wee is constantly yellow. If it's orange, go to the doctor straight away.
Get checked out.
Yeah, get it checked out. If it's yellow, that means, unless you're taking lots of vitamin B, it means that you are not hydrated enough. So get yourself to that place where it's nice and colorless as you're doing it. In terms of things like spicy foods and so forth, the only reason they're an issue is if they cause reflux. And lots of people have what's called silent reflux. That means they don't know they have it because they don't feel it. It's silent in terms of pain. But if you wake up in the morning and you have a very gunky throat, slightly sore throat, consistently in the morning, then it's a good idea to go to your GP and talk to them about the idea of silent reflux. What often happens is the acid comes up through the sphincter in the top of your stomach, ends up a little bit too relaxed. The acid leaks up your esophagus, spills over the top, burns the back of your throat and your vocal folds. And so what happens is the mucosal layers start producing loads of mucus to stop yourself getting burned. So that's a top tip there, is like, if you've got a gunky throat in the morning, go to your GP, get checked out and discuss it with them.
That's so many myths just knocked out of the park right there.
There's so many myths in singing.
What would you say is the best advice that you've been given as a singer?
Ooh. The best advice I've been given. Do you know, it's not what I was given by a teacher.
Right.
It's what I learned myself. So, and it's not a single thing.
Right.
I can't say that there's one piece of advice that I was ever given that was like, oh, that's the thing.
Yeah.
It's more like just the cumulative journey of just discovery and constantly asking questions. I would say this to people: constantly be inquisitive. Be inquisitive about your voice. Try new things all the time, every day. Try making new, weird, and wonderful sounds. As long as you're not driving air by yanking in your belly button, as long as you're not going for super high pitched, mega loud, intensive sounds, as long as you're not losing your voice or ending up hoarse or whatever, or it causing you to be tickly or choked when you sing, experiment with your voice, because the voice loves the diversity of sounds. So be inquisitive would be my number one top tip to people, and be diligent, because I think if I'm going to talk to people in the church, here's the thing: a lot of them did not come through formal training routes in music, right? And so over the years, they didn't build the stamina of the concentration or the diligence or the methodology of how to practice. And that can be one of the biggest adjustments for people coming into it later who've never had that level of rigor in their lives before. And I just want to put it out there: you can make progress just by having a singing lesson once a week. You absolutely can. And you can make reasonably good progress. But the number one piece of advice, other than be curious, is be disciplined.
Yeah.
Be diligent in your focus. I'm not going to lose my podgy tummy from lockdown without being diligent about my diet and diligent about my exercise. It's not going to happen. That six pack's not coming unless I'm diligent. It doesn't matter how much I hope it will. It simply won't. And it doesn't matter how much wishful thinking and hoping you do that your voice is going to improve. If you don't apply the correct things in the correct way, it's not going to happen. Wishful thinking is lovely. Doesn't make a difference, though.
I'm really glad you didn't say this was the defining moment, because for me, as a creative, as a guitarist, as a sound engineer, as everything that I do, like, I've often wondered, did I miss that, like, shining light moment? And when I was talking recently about it, like, it was like, no, it has just been you just keep plugging away. When you take 2 steps forward and 1 step back, you remember that you've actually made progress, and the steps become bigger, and your confidence doesn't lie in what you do, but it's in how you've got there, and the favor that's been upon you. So for me personally, like, I just love hearing how you've pushed through some challenges that, for someone without that confidence that comes from God and that faith in his call, and that faithfulness towards his word, like, I think a lot of people would have been floored by that and wouldn't have got back up. So for everyone that's watching, like, that is in itself going to be a massive encouragement. But just for to bring the questions to a close, like what's some encouragement that you could just give for the next steps for people, the bit that they maybe can't see themselves?
Can I just, you just talked about confidence.
Yeah.
And people might look at me and think I'm really confident, right?
Yeah.
But without me going into the fullness of the journey, again, that's just comparing and saying, oh, it's okay for you, you're confident. I wasn't always this confident, and there are
Yeah.
still some areas in my life where I don't feel confident.
Yeah.
And I really want to encourage people to say it is a journey. It's a journey with Jesus, just as you were saying. And the number one piece of advice I could give to anyone is pursue your journey with Jesus above all else. Pursue that above all else. Yes, pursue your creativity. Yes, pursue your craft. Yes, pursue getting your voice sorted out, all that kind of thing. But confidence is, if you'd have met me 20 years ago, you might have thought that I was confident superficially, but I absolutely was not. I absolutely was not. I was scared. I was full of anxiety. Like I said, I was depressed. The anxiety for me was so extreme. At one point I was losing a lot of weight, and then I would yo-yo and put loads of weight on. And I remember going through a season where for 6 to 9 months all I could eat was like 1 bag of ready salted crisps a day, because the anxiety was so intense. I felt sick the whole time, so any other food would make me feel nauseous. And like, my life is completely different back then. And there is no other way to say it, that Jesus totally makes the difference. And so any confidence I have is because of him. The Apostle Paul says, I don't have any confidence in myself. All of my confidence is in him and his finished work. And here's the thing, he said, that amazing passage, I believe that God is able to complete that which he started in you. And to everyone who's watching this, I have full faith that God is able to complete that which he started on the inside of you. So if you're a singer and you have major issues with your nerves or your confidence, or if you're constantly worried, is my voice going to come out today? Or you're afraid of singing in front of other people, or you're afraid that people will judge you, or you're afraid that you're not as good as the person who stands next to you on a Sunday, or in the session booth, or in the recording studio, or in the theater, or wherever it is you're singing, or whatever it is you're doing, Jesus will bring to completion that which he started in you to the degree to which you let him. And you have to be vulnerable to let him do it. Here's the thing. This is what I would say to you. Vulnerability is the thing that connects you to your congregation, your audience, and to God more than anything else. If you want to connect to God in the secret place, be vulnerable. Don't gloss it over. If you come into the presence of God and you feel like you have to say, oh God, I feel like this today. I know I shouldn't feel like this, and I know I shouldn't feel like that, and I'm really sorry that I feel. If you're saying, I know I shouldn't, and I'm sorry that I feel blah, 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 that shows that you don't yet know him as your loving father. Because when you know him as your loving father, you can just run in like a little kid does. Like, you've got little kids, right? And they just run in and they just upset. That's it. They just run in upset. They don't apologize for being upset. They come in the fullness of their vulnerability. This person did this to me and it really hurt, or I fell over and I hit my head and it hurts. They just express where they're at. They have zero filter. And so for you guys to be able to connect in worship, to be able to connect with people that you're singing to or over, whatever the context, either as a performer or a worshiper, you need to be okay being vulnerable. And that means you need to open up your heart first of all to Jesus, so that he can go looking around in there. He already knows what's in there, but so you can release it to him. I'm just going to be super vulnerable. This morning I was praying and I was like, oh God, I feel something. What is this? When I was 6 years old, for my birthday, my parents bought me a little blue budgie, like a real one, called Bertie, and he used to come and sit on my shoulder, and he'd come when I called him. He'd sit on my finger, and I can feel the emotion now. And we used to put him in the kitchen. We'd leave the door open of the cage and he'd fly around, and we'd leave a little bit of water in the sink so he could have a little bath. And, you know, he was great. And we'd come in and he'd fly straight to me, and then I'd be able to put him back in his cage and all hunky-dory. One day we went swimming. We came back from swimming and my mum just screamed as we walk in the kitchen, and she locked me out of the kitchen. The cat had got in somehow and
Oh,
had killed the budgie, and all that was left was a foot and a pile of feathers. And I realized this morning when praying, I hadn't thought about this for years. The Lord just brought it up. He brought it up as a trauma, a 6-year-old trauma. And so God took me back into the memory, and he started to heal the memory of that, because I realized there was some unresolved grief. And here's the thing, if we have unresolved issues, even in our heart, like, you might think that's not the biggest deal in the world, but to a 6-year-old, that's a
yeah,
huge thing for a 6-year-old. But I had buried it as a 6-year-old because I didn't want to make a fuss.
yeah,
I didn't want to be upset because my mum was upset. And because I saw my mum was upset, I didn't want to add to her pain. And so many of us have these things. And so what I realized this morning as Holy Spirit started speaking to me was there was a blockage in my emotional expression and in my creativity from when I'd shut it down when I was 6 years old. Now, that's just a small example of how, for many of us, on a daily basis, little traumas come in and they start to shut down our hearts. And that's when we go right back to the beginning, what I was saying at the beginning. We start to express out of pain rather than out of genuine God-given creativity. So here's the thing I would say. Get vulnerable with Jesus. Set your voice free by setting it free with him, first of all.
yeah.
By expressing to him everything that's on the inside and letting him bring that place of healing and life and freedom to you. That is what I would say. All the technical stuff, that's relatively easy. That can be worked on. It's hard work, but it's relatively easy. God does the rest. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Awesome. Well, your time has been so appreciated, not just by me, but I'm sure by everyone who'll watch this and share it and take a lot from it. Did you have anything else you wanted to share? Do you feel like we've covered everything that was on your heart?
I think that's it. But if anyone wants to get in touch, feel free. If you want to get in touch about voice stuff, just go to robkatesvoice.com. That's Kates with a C. robkatesvoice.com with a C, and just fill out the contact form there. If you want to get in touch with me about ministry, just go to robkates.com. They're two separate ones. Or on my Insta profile, there's my link tree, which has got all the different contact information. So just get in touch. I'd be delighted to hear from you. And yeah, bless you guys as you just continue making amazing music for Jesus.